cliff. When we talk about land value capture, we're saying, is this keeping people from falling off? Is this enabling people to live a healthy life? And so what I'm going to ask Ambrose to talk about is what's going on with the hospitals and a piece of legislation that we think might enable us to better understand when we look at these different development projects, is this enabling people to live a healthy life? Is this pushing people towards displacement, pushing people towards things that are going to make it more difficult for people to live the life that they want to live? So Ambrose, I'm not going to ask him to come up, but if he's going to just like stand up from here and talk about what's going on.
How's everybody doing? And if I don't see you again, everybody please have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Sometimes you forget about the little things, and that's very important, just to say Happy Holidays to everybody, even in the midst of the madness that we are seeing. So, to give you a quick update on the hospital, as some of you may know, on Tuesday there was a vote on what was called the East End Health Equity Act. There were 3 amendments that were passed to that legislation, and then subsequently Chairman Gray asked for the legislation to be tabled until the 17th, which is the next legislative session on the 17th. In a nutshell, since that time, Universal Health Services, which is the management company that manages George Washington University Hospital, has decided that they would suspend negotiations on the management of the new hospital, which is to be built in Southeast. And there are several layers to this, so let me kind of give you a synopsis. So for the most part, the two, Councilmember Gray introduced 2 pieces of amendments. One was 50 beds that would be transferred from the proposed site in Foggy Bottom to go to the new hospital on St. E's campus, which would raise the number of beds from 150 to 200. That was the first amendment. The second amendment, he proposed that 50 beds that would be at the new site on Foggy Bottom would go immediately into the existing George Washington University Hospital, which would reduce the number of beds at the new site to 170 from 270 beds. This caused, I don't know how many people saw it, this caused a whole bunch of consternation and confusion within the council on the committee of the whole. Councilmember Trayon White, which Councilmember Gray supported, introduced legislation that would compel Universal Health Services to work with, negotiate with, and enter into some type of agreement with Howard University to be part of the new site on St. E's campus. The second piece of other legislation, other than Gray's introduction of amendments, was Councilmember Silverman's introduction of legislation that would support the Union 1199, which is the Hospital Workers Union, and the DC Nurses Association. All of this caused even more consternation, and Councilmember Gray deemed those pieces a poison pill, which subsequently led to Universal Health Services suspending negotiations. So, as chair of the Health Alliance Network, I'll just say, oh, that's bullshit. I mean, that's all I can say. It's all bullshit.
Preacher.
In all of the discussion that I heard, and I was there for the hearing, and all of the discussion I heard, it didn't matter who the stakeholder was, I heard not a peep of information supporting patients and residents. Everybody was out for their cut of the pie. Now, having said that, I continued, and I'll be writing my statement on Monday. I'll be sending that out Monday. I continue to support Councilmember Gray's call for an equitable and fair health care system for East End residents. I continue to support that. But I also support 1199 and DC Nurses Association to be able to have a good collective bargaining agreement, and that at least have a preferential hiring from the old United Medical Center over to the new hospital. Well, of course, you already know. Walter's my own little personal cheerleader. And I continue to support that. I also, as someone who came out of Howard University, support the need for Howard University to be at the table in the negotiation.
All right, all right.
That having said that, Universal Health Services at best has a shaky record when it comes to hospitals that they manage in other parts of the country. They certainly do have a shaky record when it comes to their working with unions. Okay?
Definitely.
It is hard for me to believe that
Reason
you
why I ain't
cannot
working there.
find a reputable hospital manager somewhere else in this country to bring them to DC, to offer them the ability or the chance and opportunity to manage the new hospital on St. E's campus. Foggy Bottom residents are irate because of the new tower that is being built, to the point where George Washington University itself, which only has 20% ownership in the hospital, to be against the building of the new tower on Foggy Bottom. But I have a feeling about that too, okay? Because not in my backyard, folks, sometimes use the not in my backyard issue to keep minorities away. That's notwithstanding the density issue, which I think is a legitimate issue by Foggy Bottom residents. I think that is a legitimate issue. But the not in my backyard, I don't want it to be a thing where we don't want black people or poor people to come over to Foggy Bottom to enjoy the benefits of a new hospital. I'm gonna just say it up front.
That's what it is. Tell it like it is.
So what's gonna happen is that on December 17th, there's going to be another legislative hearing. There's pressure right now that's being put on both Silverman and Trayon White to withdraw their amendments. Councilmember Gray told me specifically, and at that hearing, in between the sessions, that what his attempt was to be able to get the council to be a part of the negotiations with Universal Health Services. Right now, those negotiations are only being taken place through the mayor and through the city administrator. Those are the only ones that are negotiating with Universal Health Services. Nobody else is. Gray wants the council to have a hand in the negotiation. And if that happens, then the council can say that we will stand up for $11.99, stand up for the DC nurses. DC nurses are mainly black nurses that exist over at United Medical Center and other places in DC. That the council will stand up for them, and that they will stand up also for Howard University, if that happens. So if that happens, if that kind of introduction of amendment takes place, there will be no need for neither Silverman's nor White's amendments, because the council will have a hand in the negotiation with Universal Health Services. Okay. As far as Providence is concerned, 'cause I know they're Ward 5 people. Providence is a whole nother mess.
I believe it.
And all this illustrates is the crisis in healthcare in this city that has been going on for quite some time, even after the debacle of DC General. Okay. So the crisis with Providence has been averted somewhat, but I don't think it's really been averted, as they have delayed the closing of the emergency room until sometime in April. But the only thing that they agreed to do thus far is keep 15, 20 beds available. Now you have 50,000 people that use the emergency room at Providence every single year.
Yep.
So I don't know how 15, 17, 18 beds is going to make a bit of difference when you got 50,000 people that use Providence Emergency Services. So that was a drop in the bucket. That was some other BS. Both the executive, which is the mayor's office, can decide to delay Providence's closing and keep the whole emergency room open if they wanted to. The council already passed a clarity resolution that states that the law says through SHPTA that the mayor has the authority to keep Providence open, the emergency room services open, until such time as they erect another plan that makes sense, where hospitals can absorb the 50,000 people yearly into other hospitals. They're being absorbed right now. Howard University is absorbing them. George Washington University is absorbing them. And you already have Washington Hospital Center that's also absorbing patients that would normally go to Providence Hospital. So that's the update on the hospitals real quick. On legislation, because David mentioned about one of the points of the resolution, I believe it is point number 4 about enforcing the project impact assessment. In 2015, David Grosso introduced legislation called Health Impact Assessment legislation. That legislation never got out of committee. It was under Yvette Alexander. She never pulled it up for even a vote. And that's a whole nother thing. Okay. Last year, Councilmember Grasso and I was doing work on health impact assessments with Pew Charitable Trust Foundation. So last year, Councilmember Grasso asked me if I would revive health impact assessment legislation. Since that time, since last year, I've worked with George Washington University School of Public Health, particularly the Summer Redstone Institute that's located at the School of Public Health, and work with Grasso's office on crafting language and introducing a new health impact assessment legislation bill, which has been introduced. So that has been introduced this fall. What health impact legislation does is very similar to what an environmental impact statement does, but it's different. Health impact assessment legislation looks through the lens of health in all policies, HIAP, which is out by American Public Health Association, I think based in California. But it's part of HIAP view, health in all policies view. In other words, in all of the agencies in the District of Columbia, codes that are created, laws that are created, do they have a view towards better health for the citizens of the District of Columbia? That's what health in all policies actually means. And so HIAs, or health impact assessments, would apply to something like the new development at Brooklyn Manor. Okay? It would apply in the way of, does the developer, in the way that they created the plan, have in that plan a view of better health for the residents that will be living in that development. Okay? And it gets down to the type of surface that you use for the sidewalks. It gets down to the type and shape of windows that you use in the development. Because all of these things, it has been proven, lend towards better health. Okay? So when you look at projects like Old Fletcher Johnson and Ward 7 that hardly has any windows, looks like a jail, obviously they did not use a health impact assessment because we know that it looks like a jail. Okay? And so health impact assessment can be used in all types of development projects so that those developers look at that development from a health standpoint. We're not talking about LEED. We're not talking about fluorescent light bulbs and all that other stuff. We're talking about health. We're talking about looking through the lens of health. So the health impact assessment legislation, which will come up for a first vote, I believe, soon. If it doesn't this year, it will next year because it's already been introduced. Does that, and really you want to take a look at that. It's right now, it's on the books. You can actually see and read the legislation. It calls for the Department of Health to determine whether or not a health impact assessment is necessary for a development. And that's any development, 50-unit building or a 500-unit building or a 1,000-unit building. And even if it's not livable space, if it's just commercial property, does it lend towards better health for the community by that building being built, by that project being done? What is happening over in Ward 6 over by Greenleaf? Same thing. Okay, in the building of the soccer stadium, same thing. A health impact assessment was needed, even though a different kind of assessment did take place. It wasn't a health impact assessment. So you want to support that legislation, and that's the relevance 2.4 in the resolution. So that's my update. Is that good, David? Where's David? Is that good? Are there any questions? Anybody have any questions? I knew there'd be questions. I knew you'd have one right here. All right, go ahead.
Thank you so much. That was great. My question is, how long has this concept and ideas around the science of development and impact of health? Was this knowledge available 10 years ago? Yeah. Is this recent, something new all of a sudden it's just popped up?
I won't say that it was available 10 years ago. It's relatively recent. How I came about learning about health impact assessments have probably, more specifically, been around, I would say, about between 5 and 7 years at the most. Okay, I learned about it because I went to a health affairs. I'm sorry? I'd say one administration in the tail end of another. Okay, all right. Somebody else had a question? Yes.
Will the health impact matter affect things like the increase of density in a place like Brooklyn Manor, where they're moving 3, 4, and 5 bedroom apartments?
Density would be a tool to measure in terms of a health impact assessment, absolutely.
I mean, obviously, if there are not enough spaces for families to live in, that has a big health impact.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that, Peter.
Yeah, I'm curious, there is no project impact assessment requirement now, is that correct?
There's no project impact assessment requirement, but I believe that there might be an environmental impact statement that has to be
The
done.
reason I'm asking is this has been an objective of mine for several years, that there should be a social impact assessment which would include, you can argue about the merits or not of having health impact as sort of freestanding or else, there should be a social impact assessment on all of the things, on the whole range of things. This one that's the thing that's, the language here is basically about, pretty much about housing. If it's broadened, then it really is a full social impact assessment. It would include health and everything else. It wouldn't diminish the detail that you described, but we don't hold we have nothing like this instrument at all. You may argue that you want to get it health separately. I don't know, but none of this exists now at all, and I don't. Maybe it doesn't.
Well, I would say a health impact assessment is based more on science and social determinants, which may include some social issues. I'm not sure that a social impact assessment, I'm not sure exactly what that is.
Because it doesn't mostly, the only thing that's been legislated federally and mostly federally is environmental impact assessment. We don't do it in any of the other things.
Correct.
So this all can be strengthened, what I'm saying.
Yes.
This all can be strengthened, detailed, and under the rubric of social impact assessment, which includes density, includes environmental, it includes traffic and congestion and all kinds of stuff, and then link it to the what's already in the comprehensive plan.
I would tend to agree with what you're saying, even though the way that HIAs are done is a little bit more specified, but I do agree generally with what you're saying.
Ambrose, can I jump in here? Just to that point, so our resolution is, we want principles in the framework element. The framework element is the leading chapter of the comp plan, right? So it's where we set the principles for the rest of the plan, where the details are. So if we can get a principle in the framework element that says we want project impact assessments done for new projects, big new projects, then in the later chapters, in the chapter on economic development, in the chapter on housing, in the chapter on social development or environmental issues, we can have specific policies in there that says we want a health impact assessment, we want a social impact assessment, we want environmental assessment.
Let me piggyback on something that Chris is talking about, because if you all remember, before this came out, or before the comprehensive plan amendments came out, they were taking comments from around the city, okay? So the Milken Institute actually proposed health impact assessments be included as a part of it. They rejected it.
Well, for in the framework element.
Right,
We might be able to
framework
get it in the
That's
later
right.
chapter.
You need to do,
Right.
I would argue, and I can speak later to you about it, this needs to be broadened beyond what.
This is as broad as it gets. It's a principle in our framework element, but we can get to the details in the later chapters.
I have 1, 2, 3 questions.
So this assessment that you're talking about, this is for the community that's there, as opposed to, is it one assessment or 2 assessments? The response, what's going to happen to the community that's already on this land, this place?
That's not what a health impact assessment
Okay,
would
well,
do.
whatever, the people that live there.
Right.
Okay, the people that live in this particular location.
The health impact assessment would be would be a group. We're proposing that it actually be done by an outside group, not be done by the Department of Health, but it be done by an outside group, like Pew Charitable Trust, who's done this around the country, to analyze the development plan, to see whether, through a health impact assessment, to see whether or not this project lends towards better health, and to make recommendations as to how the project could lend towards better health. That's what a health impact assessment would be. There's another, you had your hand up in the.
I was just gonna say, like, you could, just thinking of the work of like Mindy Fullilove, who describes the health impact as encompassing much more than people's like physical health,
Yes.
but like psychological
Yes,
health and
absolutely does.
Trauma and,
Yes.
and post-traumatic stress, and
Yes.
all of that social impact could come under the rubric of health.
Yes.
But I think it needs to be defined that way, so, yeah.
So, you know, I'm Robert Warren, and you know, and I'm involved with an organization called People Fairness Coalition, and so I primarily, you know, the organization that I'm involved with, we are homeless and formerly homeless individuals who are actually working this group, and I know my colleague over here, Reginald Black, is a resident of 801 East, and I know that when they were actually tearing the hospital down, he had a lot of concern about the health of those 380 homeless men who actually stay at 801 East. And so I know there was a lot of talk around DC General and them families over there and the health problems associated with just the construction that they were doing outside of that hospital. But I heard nothing said at all about the impact on those homeless individuals who are currently on the grounds of 801 East. And you know, it's just, I mean, I guess it's okay, because it's just 380 black men, you know, we don't really, it's not a big thing, you know, and, but, you know, it's just so much going on in this city, man, it's just sickening, it's sickening. And I just tell you guys, I'm just so proud of all you guys in this room, I really am. I'm just so proud of you guys, and I just hope we can just stick together.
Oh, yeah.
If we stick together, we can do something to change that. So just hoping that you will kind of, in your process of, you know, dealing with this hospital, please don't forget those 380 men that's on the grounds right now with all kind of different health problems, issues that need to be addressed. Thank you.
As y'all can see, I'm here. I'm limping in here. I'm here.
Ambrose, do you want to share your input so we can state, like, if we want to push up with you?
Sure. I can be reached. I'll give you my email address. It is Ambrose, 2M, that's AMBROSE, the number 2, the letter M, at gmail.com. If you need my number, I have some cards that I can do.
And what's the group name?
Health Alliance Network, that's the group that we meet every month at Benning Library. Our next meeting is on January the 7th, where we will be dealing with trauma, including trauma of trauma of children of incarcerated parents.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you. Thanks, Amber.